The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting golden stripes across the wooden floors of my quiet house in Colorado Springs. I blinked into the stillness. The same stillness that had greeted me every morning for the last 6 years. That's how long it had been since Frank passed. And yet, even now, a small part of me expected him to walk into the room with his usual smile and that steaming mug of chamomile tea. But no one came. I'm Maggie Elliott, 67, a widow, former school librarian. And, in the most honest moments, I'd call myself something else. Too forgotten. It hadn't happened all at once. No. It was slow. Like Colorado snow piling up inch by inch until you realized you couldn't open the front door. One missed call. One canceled visit. Sorry. Mom. Work's crazy. Can't swing by today. Rain check. My son David lived just an hour away in Denver. But sometimes it felt like he was on another planet. Emily, my daughter, was in Boulder. Juggling work. A marriage. And 2 kids who barely looked up from their iPads when I visited. Still, today felt different. Today, I was hosting Sunday dinner, a real one. Roast beef for David. Grilled salmon for Emily. Nuggets for the grandkids. And that old apple pie recipe they used to beg for. I had made a list the night before. Just like Frank and I always did for family events. I still had his handwriting saved in the margins of some old cookbooks. Faded and soft. After a quick breakfast, I wrapped myself in the cashmere cardigan Frank gave me for our 30th anniversary, worn thin now, but still the warmest thing I owned, and stepped out into the crisp morning. The air in Colorado Springs always had a bite to it. Even in spring, I walked past the garage, where my old Subaru sat collecting dust. David had practically begged me to stop driving after I dented the bumper last year. Mom, it's time, he'd said, like he was putting an old dog to rest. I hadn't argued, but I could still drive. Frank always said I was the better one behind the wheel. At the grocery store, I moved carefully through each aisle, picking out the ingredients I knew by heart. A cashier I barely knew smiled warmly. Big dinner today. I nodded. Family's coming over. She beamed. How wonderful. Wonderful. That was one word for it. But somewhere inside, I wondered if they'd see me at all or just the food waiting on the table. As I stepped back out into the parking lot with my groceries, clouds gathered over Pikes Peak. A breeze rustled through the evergreens, and I paused, clutching my bags. All I wanted was to feel part of something again. Not just useful, not just background noise, but seen, heard, loved, and I wasn't sure that was still possible. The roast beef had been in the oven for 2 hours when the doorbell rang. I adjusted my cardigan, smoothed my hair in the hallway mirror, and opened the door to David and his family. Hey. Mom, he said with that rushed tone he always used, like being here was just another box on his to-do list. Vanessa, his wife, leaned in with an air kiss that never quite touched my cheek. Her lipstick was too perfect for real contact. Their son, Tyler, 15 and surgically attached to his phone, mumbled, "Hi," without lifting his eyes. Only Chloe, my 13-year-old granddaughter, gave me a real hug. "You smell like cookies," she whispered. And I smiled. Emily and her husband Mark arrived 15 minutes later. She was in a flurry, apologizing for traffic, blaming Mark for losing his keys, talking so fast I barely caught my name. Sophie, their 10-year-old daughter, gave me a soft smile and held my hand for just a second. We gathered in the living room, and I brought out the appetizers, mini quiches, and cheese cubes. Nothing fancy, but familiar. I tried to start a conversation. So, how's work? David, same old. Same old. Budgets. Meetings. Clients, he said without looking up from his plate. Emily, oh. It's quarter end, she said, sighing heavily. Deadlines everywhere. You know how it is. I didn't. Not anymore. Dinner was served right at 6:30. The roast came out beautifully browned. The mashed potatoes were creamy, and the salad was fresh with just a touch of vinaigrette. I even lit candles, something Frank used to do when he wanted to make a night feel special. Smells great. Mom, David said, carving the roast with a practiced hand. I brought over a pitcher of iced tea and started filling glasses. And then it happened. Mom. Sit down, David said with a laugh. You're not the waitress. The room chuckled. Vanessa covered her mouth like it was the funniest thing in the world. Emily smirked into her wine glass. Even Tyler glanced up from his phone. Amused. I froze. Something about that word waitress sliced deeper than it should have. I looked around the table at the people I had raised. Cooked for. Loved with every corner of my being. And all I could think was, is that how they see me? A server? Not a person. Not a mother. Just service. I'm not a waitress, I said softly but clearly. The room went quiet. I'm your mother. And sometimes it feels like no one in this family remembers that. No one spoke. Even Tyler looked up, suddenly unsure of himself. David cleared his throat. Geez. Mom. I was just kidding. Were you? I asked. Silence again. Awkward. Uncomfortable. Vanessa quickly changed the subject, asking Emily about Sophie's school play. Just like that. The moment vanished. Or they pretended it did. We moved on to dessert, my apple pie. The one David used to request every birthday. I placed it in the center of the table with more hope than pride. David didn't look up. Cool. Thanks. Mom, he said, eyes still on his phone. I dropped the pie knife while cutting slices. The clang rang out like a bell. I'll get another, I said, heading to the kitchen. No need. David stood. You've been on your feet all day. I'll handle it. His voice wasn't warm. It was dismissive, as if I was clumsy. Old. He returned with a new knife and began cutting the pie himself, giving me a patronizing smile. See, easy. You just have to glide the blade gently. Less pressure. I sat in silence, surrounded by my family, and had never felt more invisible. I don't know what made me say it. Maybe it was the way David explained how to cut a pie like I hadn't been doing it since he was in diapers. Maybe it was the way Vanessa laughed as if I were a child bumping into things. Or maybe it was that word waitress still echoing in my head, bruising more the longer it sat there. Whatever it was, it rose up like a wave I couldn't hold back. As David passed slices of pie, I cleared my throat. You know what, you're right. I'm not a waitress. I'm your mother. A mother who seems to have become invisible in her own home. The forks froze midair. Even Tyler looked up. David tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Come on. Mom. It was just a joke. No, I said calmly. It wasn't. Not really. Another silence. Heavier this time. Vanessa glanced at Emily like someone should say something. Emily looked away. I let the moment stretch, just long enough to make them squirm. And then I said it. I've made a decision. I said, Something I've been thinking about for a long time. I'm going to donate my savings over $1 million to charity. David blinked. Wait. What? You heard me. Emily sat back, stunned. 1 million? Since when do you have that kind of money? Since your father started investing in small tech companies back in the late 90s? He believed in slow growth. And in people. Turns out he was right. Vanessa's jaw tightened. And you never told anyone. I didn't think it was the kind of thing that should define our relationship. David let out a small, nervous laugh. So, you're going to give it all away? Just like that? Yes. To strangers. To people who don't have anyone. Who aren't just forgotten until the holidays. Or when someone needs a check for a new laptop. The words landed with a thud. Tyler looked down at his phone. Chloe's eyes darted nervously toward the kitchen. Sophie looked like she might cry. Emily leaned forward. Mom, this is a huge decision. Shouldn't we talk about it first? I tilted my head. Did you talk to me before buying a new car for 80 grand? David, that's different. He said quickly. It's our money. No. Sweetheart. I said, with a calm I didn't know I had. It's my money. And this isn't about the money. This is about the years of being treated like I'm made of dust. Vanessa crossed her arms. This feels like punishment. No. I said, it's a boundary. Mark. Quiet until now. Spoke gently. Madje. Are you sure? Maybe sleep on it. Think it through. I have, for months. Emily sighed, rubbing her forehead. So what now? You walk away and give everything to a nonprofit? I give all of you something more valuable than money. Time. Space. 6 months. I'll be going to stay with Aunt June in Santa Fe. No calls unless it's an emergency. No visits. Use the time however you want. Are we being tested? David snapped. No. You're being released. Sophie whispered. Will you still come to my school play? I turned to her and smiled gently. I wouldn't miss it for the world. She ran to hug me, and I held on a little tighter than usual. Chloe stood up slowly. Grandma, if you leave, will you come back? I looked around the room. These were my people. My blood. And yet, I felt like I was saying goodbye to a room full of polite strangers. I'll come back, I said. But when I do, I hope I'm not the only one who's changed. And with that, I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a cup of tea. Not one person offered to help. But I didn't mind. For the first time in years, I wasn't serving anyone. I was setting myself free. Santa Fe greeted me with warm adobe walls, air scented with sagebrush, and skies so wide they made Colorado feel like a hallway. My sister June stood on the platform at the tiny station, waving a red scarf like she was trying to guide in an airplane. About time you got here. Madji. She grinned, pulling me into a hug so tight I nearly dropped my suitcase. I was 2 days away from driving up there and dragging you down myself. Her house sat on the edge of town, nestled against the red hills. A small stone cottage, filled with the smell of lavender and paint thinner. June had always been the wild one, sculptures half finished in the yard. Jazz music playing from an old speaker. And kitchen counters cluttered with handmade mugs and chipped teacups from flea markets. It felt like freedom. And for a while, I didn't know what to do with that. The first few days, I felt guilty every time I didn't call David or check in on Emily. I'd catch myself reaching for the phone after breakfast, only to put it down. That space I'd asked for. It was harder to live than to declare. But June gave me room. You want to go to the farmer's market with me? Great. You don't, I'll bring you back a peach. She didn't coddle me. She didn't expect anything. She just let me be. It was disorienting. Then slowly grounding. One morning over coffee, I told her I'd always wanted to learn photography. Frank had given me a camera for our silver anniversary, but I'd never figured out how to use it. Life had always gotten in the way. Well, June said, pushing aside a stack of magazines, you're in the right place. Santa Fe's crawling with artists. And I happen to know a guy. That guy was Ben Foster. 72. Silver ponytail. And an eye for light that could make a pile of rocks look like a cathedral. He taught a beginner's class at the community center. The first day, I fumbled with the buttons on my camera like a tourist at Times Square. Ben just smiled. You see with your heart before your lens. The rest is just practice. I started taking long walks through the arroyos, capturing shadows on stucco walls. The way sunlight spilled over adobe rooftops at dusk, I photographed elderly couples holding hands in the plaza, children chasing pigeons, and once, a dog sleeping beside a street musician's case. I sent one of those photos to Tyler, my teenage grandson. He'd always been into digital art, though he rarely admitted it out loud. To my surprise, he replied within minutes, "This is actually good. Grandma, what kind of filter did you use?" That small comment lit something in me. We began exchanging tips, tricks, editing apps. It wasn't much, but it was something that was ours. Not out of obligation. Not out of guilt. Just curiosity. Mutual respect. Back at the house, June teased me constantly. Look at you. Walking around like Ansel Adams with a perm. Told you retirement's a beginning, not an end. I laughed. For the first time in years, I felt like I was growing, not shrinking. And in the quiet of Santa Fe nights under stars that seemed closer than ever, I began to wonder if I could learn to see beauty in shadows and light. Could my family learn to see me again too? It had been nearly 3 months since I arrived in Santa Fe when the email came from Emily. Subject: Sophie's school play. Please come. She didn't say much, just the date, time, and that Sophie was really hoping I'd be there. But I could read between the lines. There was a nervous energy in every word. Like she wasn't sure I'd show up. But I had made a promise, and I was going to keep it. The train ride back to Colorado Springs felt different this time. I wasn't retreating, I was returning on my own terms. In my bag, I packed a new navy dress, my camera, and a bouquet of wildflowers I'd picked the morning before I left Santa Fe. I booked a small hotel near the school. I didn't even tell the kids I was coming into town early. For once, I liked having my own plans. The auditorium was half full when I arrived. Parents chattering, kids peeking from behind curtains. I found my seat in the 3rd row and sat quietly, bouquet in my lap. Mom Emily's voice broke my thoughts. She stood in the aisle, surprise painted across her face. You really came. I told Sophie I would. She gave me a soft smile. You look different. Santa Fe agrees with me, I said, smoothing my dress. So does not waiting on people. We both laughed. Awkward but real. Mark greeted me warmly, and I could tell by the way Emily looked at him. They'd talked, really talked about everything that had happened. Then David showed up with Vanessa and the kids. He looked surprised but not shocked, like he'd expected me to appear, but still hadn't prepared for it. Mom, he said. Good to see you. I nodded. You too. Tyler gave me a quick hug. Chloe wrapped her arms around me tighter than ever. And Sophie, my sweet. Shy Tree peeked out from backstage with glitter on her cheeks and excitement in her eyes. When the play began, the room went still. It was about conservation, the importance of trees, nature, and listening. Sophie's character, an old oak in a vanishing forest, had only a few lines. But when she stepped forward and spoke, her voice steady and clear, the room leaned in. She looked straight at me during her final line. Even the quiet ones have roots that run deep. I felt tears sting my eyes. After the show, we gathered in the school lobby. Sophie rushed to me, her leaves still taped to her arms. "Did you like it? I loved it," I said, handing her the wildflowers. "You were the heart of the forest." Emily wiped her eyes. She practiced that line for days. I could tell. We went out for pizza afterward. An Elliott family tradition, but something had shifted. No one stared at phones. No one talked over each other. Conversations flowed. Emily asked about my photos. Tyler showed interest in an upcoming exhibit at a gallery in Santa Fe. Chloe shared that she'd started writing poetry. David, surprisingly, was the quietest until over his second slice of pepperoni. He leaned in and said, "Mom, it's good to have you back." Really? I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him. Really looked. There was something different in his face. Less armor. More recognition. Maybe. I thought, this was the beginning. Not just of seeing each other again, but seeing each other differently. The day I returned to Colorado Springs for good, I didn't go straight to my house. I stopped at a quiet coffee shop on the north side of town, ordered an herbal tea, and sat by the window, watching clouds roll over Pikes Peak. I wasn't stalling. I just needed a moment to breathe, to think, to feel the difference between the woman who left and the one who had come back. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the porch light was already on. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary and lemon, my signature roast beef. Chloe met me at the door with a proud smile. "I helped make dinner," she announced, and Uncle David cleaned the oven. In the kitchen, everyone was there, Emily and Mark setting the table, Vanessa adjusting the candles, David standing at the stove, looking slightly out of place but determined. "What's all this?" I asked. David turned, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "A welcome home dinner. We figured it was our turn." It wasn't perfect. The carrots were a little undercooked, and the mashed potatoes were lumpy, but I had never tasted anything so warm. After dessert, yes? On apple pie. Slightly overbaked, but full of heart. David cleared his throat. "Mom, before we wrap up the evening, there's something I need to say." The room fell silent. Even Tyler put his phone down. David looked at me, his voice slower than usual. "Careful. I've had a lot of time to think. About you? About how I've treated you. And I realize now I've been treating you like a task. Something to manage. Instead of a person." Vanessa reached under the table and squeezed his hand. Emily wiped her eyes before a tear had the chance to fall. "I was scared," David admitted. "Scared of losing you. Scared of not being able to handle it if something happened. So I tried to control everything: what you ate, what you did, how you lived. And I convinced myself that was love. I didn't speak. Not yet. I wanted him to finish. And when you left," he continued, "I was angry. I told myself you were punishing us. But now I see. You were reminding us that you're not just mom or grandma or the woman who makes the pie. You're Maggie. You have a life, dreams, dizzier, and a whole world we stopped asking about." My throat tightened. "I'm sorry." he said. I'm really, truly sorry. No matter what you decide about the money, I want you to know we love you. Not for what you do, but for who you are. There it was. I looked around the room. Emily was crying quietly. Mark had his arm around her. Tyler nodded at me like we were in on a secret together. Chloe was beaming. Sophie was hugging my arm. I reached across the table and took David's hand. Thank you, I said softly. That means more than you know. Then Emily spoke up. Her voice hésitant, but sure. Mom, have you made a decision about the inheritance? I smiled, not because I was ready to answer, but because this time, the question came with genuine curiosity, not expectation. I have, I said, folding my napkin. But it's not about numbers. It's about trust. About starting over. And about making sure no one in this family ever feels invisible again. They nodded, not all at once, but slowly, like they finally understood. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of everything we had missed and might still recover. 3 weeks later, the for sale sign stood quietly in front of my old home white letters on red. Swaying in the Colorado wind, I watched it from the porch one last time, a cup of tea in my hands. The kind Frank used to bring me each morning. The house had held so much first steps. Scraped knees. Late-night favor runs. Burnt Thanksgiving turkeys. And silent tears cried alone after Frank passed. But walls can only carry memory for so long before they start to feel like stone. I wasn't escaping anything. I was stepping into something else. Emily and Mark helped me box up the kitchen. David organized the storage room, even labeling each bin with more care than I expected. The grandkids packed photo albums. Chloe asking questions about every picture. Sophie drawing hearts on each box labeled Grandma's. Tyler even made a playlist for the move, filled with 70s hits and acoustic guitar. We didn't talk about the money much anymore. That conversation had already been had. Instead, we talked about dinner plans, photography classes, and Chloe's newest poem. Emily shared that she was thinking of switching careers, returning to creative writing, something she hadn't touched since college. Vanessa, to my surprise, asked me for the apple pie recipe, said she wanted to make it for her next book club. On my last night in the house, we had one final dinner around the kitchen table. No roast beef this time. Just takeout pizza. Laughter. And the kind of peace that had felt like a stranger for far too long. After we cleared the plates, I stood up and cleared my throat. I want to tell you how I've decided to divide the inheritance. I said, 1/3 is going to a local nonprofit in Santa Fe that supports elderly people living alone. They help with everything from home visits to art classes. They remind people they still matter. No one interrupted. 1/3 will go to the two of you. I continued, looking at David and Emily. Not split evenly, but based on what I know you need. I've already worked it out with a financial advisor. David nodded. Quietly. And the last third, I said, smiling, is for me. They laughed real, light-hearted laughter. For travel, I added, and photography. And whatever else I want to try before I start forgetting where I left my keys. The next morning, I left the house with 2 suitcases, my camera, and a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. My new apartment overlooked the foothills near downtown, a place with no garden to weed, no stairs to climb, and a little balcony where I could drink tea and edit photos in the morning sun. I still saw my family, but it felt different now. Intentional. Meaningful. Emily called just to chat. David sent updates about work without complaints. Sophie's drawings came in the mail. Tyler emailed me a photo he edited, asking for my opinion. Chloe wrote me a poem titled, "The Tree That Stayed Strong," and sometimes, on quiet nights, I'd think of Frank. Of that quiet man with the steady hands and long-sighted vision. "You'd be proud," I whispered once while looking through the lens of my camera, pointed at a horizon that finally felt open. Not because I had held the family together, but because I had finally reminded them that I was part of it.